Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. It is a fine Monday. It's a different Monday, that's for sure,
Different
Ross.
Monday.
We said we'd be back here if something happened. We kind of anticipated something happened with the Saints because honestly, their hand was forced. I mean, you couldn't have sold this, right? But
No.
the Saints move on from Dennis Allen, and they announced it on Monday morning. They say relieved him of his duties. It doesn't matter how you want to slice it, right? Like, I mean, they made the move, but what's interesting is how it came about, like the way that Dennis Allen eventually got the boot, right? Like, it wasn't just the Panthers loss, right?
Right. That's
So,
got to be the big thing. Like, you have to look at sort of the. Sorry, I didn't take the baton on that one, John. That was
No,
my
you're good.
fault. That
You're
was
good.
my fault. I'm a bad relay partner.
No, you're good.
I lost us the 100-meter. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, this goes way beyond just the Carolina Panthers game. This goes beyond the 2024 season, man. You got to look back at 2022, 2023, and just them not being able to reach the standard that they set for themselves coming out of the Sean Payton era, which, make no mistake about it, is the golden era of the New Orleans Saints. And so you saw a bunch of streaks end. You saw a bunch of firsts happen. And a lot of those firsts did not go the way of Dennis Allen. And look, we said this yesterday. I want to say it again as we start today. This is a human being impacted in a negative way. So you're not going to catch us on this show, come out here and celebrating or anything like that.
Right.
We understand, though, that this does bring a lot of excitement for the future. And I think it's okay to be excited about the future and what could potentially change, while also not necessarily being excited that a human being lost their opportunity. He's going to land. He's going to get somewhere. Denver. He's a great defensive mind. He'll be fine. But I do want to acknowledge that before we go too far. But yeah, this is a move that had to happen, and the New Orleans Saints got it done. The thing that was surprising is that they did it in season, which also goes to show you, as you mentioned, their hand was forced, just how serious the situation was.
Yeah, just the willingness to be able to say, okay, we're going to change this. I think that's what the biggest takeaway is here. And look, you're right. It is a human being. And if I'm Dennis Allen, I probably don't do anything for the rest of the season. I just kind of rest up or do whatever, get my mind away. If he does go
Spend time with your
somewhere
family.
really quickly, I mean, spend some time with your family, because let's face it, he has been grinding since he got here day one, all this other stuff. It just didn't work. The product just didn't work for him. And so, look, it's somewhat quote unquote exciting because they made the change, right? But again, there's the human element to this. I mean, you never wanted to see Drew retire. You never wanted to see Sean step away.
Right.
You never wanted to see some of this stuff happen, but it does, and it's just part of the business. And at the end of the day, this is a business, and it's good to see that they finally saw what we saw, that the business results were just not there. They weren't getting done. It wasn't getting better.
Yeah, I think too that making a move like this shows your team, your roster, your players that you're serious about their dedication, that you're serious about what it is that they're going through and what the situation should look like versus what it does look like. The standard versus the expectation versus the reality, right? Like, that's always the trifecta of evaluation that you're looking at. And then on top of that, maybe a little bit of a not so often discussed storyline here is that this also proves to players outside of your organization that you're taking this seriously. There's a lot of question marks about that when it came to this team. Are they really taking it seriously, considering that maybe this firing to a lot of people should have happened like it's long overdue and everything? And so getting this done now proves something to your team, the players that are in your facility, to your staff, shows accountability finally. And also, or not finally, but again, right? Because I would say the Pete Carmichael firing was accountability, right? And it proves something to the players outside of the facility as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we harped on and talked about after the game. You know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
ramifications of keeping him in role just doesn't set a precedence. And again, you're at a point where the NFL trade deadline is Tuesday. The Saints aren't supposed to have a fire sale. I'd be really surprised if they do end up moving anybody. But
Yeah,
at
same.
the same time, this is about repairing process now. Now that you've got your interim head coach and Darren Rizzi, we're going to talk plenty about him. But the fact is,
Mhm.
like you said, showing the players that the organization does care. Because, again, it was reported that the owner Gail Benson had solicited the players for feedback and got feedback, right? And shout out to Nick Underhill at NOF for giving us
Mhm.
a peek behind the curtain, and it was a necessary peek behind the curtain, right? But at
Yeah.
the same time, it just couldn't continue, and you kept seeing the subtle, not so subtle jabs. I mean, Alvin Kamara always speaks truth. Like,
Yep.
two things I love about him, and even Tyron Matthew, like those two are probably the realest people. Like just tell it like it is. Like he's not going
Mhm.
to sugarcoat it. Neither was Tyron, even talking about his play on the field. But Alvin's going to tell you like it is, and that's one of the things I've always respected about both of those guys is that they don't dance around stuff. They're not this rah rah cheerleader type stuff. They're going to tell you what. Like I've said it, you said it. If you ever want to get a pulse on where the team really is at, just go talk to Alvin Kamara. He's going to tell.
Yep. 100%.
Iron's going to be 100% honest with you. And so, for them to obviously see something happen and for these players to see something happen, I mean, you've seen Carl Granderson's reaction on Instagram. That was
Mhm.
I don't think that's
Very
going to
telling.
be the last one. But again, you see how divided everything was, and the writing was on the wall, and you just start seeing now that as you peel the layers back, this was the best move for New Orleans.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. After the loss to the Carolina Panthers, a team that the Saints looks at themselves as like the exact opposite of, not directly in terms of comparing themselves to Carolina, but you look at Carolina, the number of head coaches that they swing through, the level of expectation that's kind of like the microwave level of expectation that David Tepper has, the impatience that they show, the types of roster moves that they make, all those other things. The Saints do things almost virtually the opposite of the Carolina Panthers. And then when you go in there and you lose to that team, who you also blew out at the beginning of the season, it's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, right? And I mean
Yeah.
literal straw. Like that's how minuscule this win was in the overall decision to move on from Dennis Allen. And so I think that's you're looking at, now you're looking ahead to the new era of New Orleans Saints football, what it can be. It's not going to be ready in 2025. It's probably not going to be ready in 2026. If the Saints are smart, they give themselves as much time. They go into this rebuild, which is what it's going to be. Anytime you replace your head coach, it's a rebuild. Anytime that you're doing that, it's a rebuild. Does not matter. Anytime you replace your head coach or you're replacing your quarterback. And so if you approach this rebuild with the same fervor that you approached maintaining your cohesion in the past, you're going to have a very successful rebuild. That's the way that I look at this for New Orleans. They need to just completely turn their nose, like completely 180 on what their own expectations of themselves are, but approach it with the same level of ferocity in order to be able to really, or veracity, excuse me, in order to be able to maximize this opportunity that's now ahead of them.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's opportunity because now
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at a situation where you essentially have 3 months of evaluation to be done,
Yep.
right? Like whether you're a
Yep.
player, a coach, it doesn't matter. Darren Rizzi's going to be there, and we're going to talk plenty about him here soon. But you know, everything's now in focus. Like now you're looking at whether you're a free agent, whether you're on the roster, it should probably be a little bit uncomfortable. Like I think a lot of players will get behind Darren Rizzi. Like most of the rosters,
Yeah.
obviously that's an easy sell, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, the details, the accountability, all these other things, like it's just time for these players that are expected to perform to go out there and perform. Like
Yep.
you got rid of the problem, quote unquote. Now it's time that you actually go execute and deliver. And if you turn in the same results, obviously that's a different conversation altogether. But players are going to be playing for jobs. You've said it before that 31 other teams are going to be looking, even
Mm-hmm.
if they don't move on from their pieces from the trade deadline. Again, Marshawn Lattimore's future here is questionable. Ryan Ramczyk, he's probably going to retire here soon. That's going to be something to worry about. Do they keep a Chase Young now? Do they keep a Willie Gay Jr.? What do they do now defensively? Because Joe Woods is going to be the defensive coordinator here, but Dennis Allen's kind of bread and butter. He picks out his defensive guys. So how much of a turnover is there going to be defensively now? Because I could see maybe some different coaches moving on now, or they move on from different coaches in some aspects. But there's a lot of things to weigh out over the next several months. But the good news is they made the move early enough to be able to put themselves in a position where they can at least evaluate and have a
Yeah.
heavy evaluation period.
Yeah, and you get an opportunity to look at the young guys on your roster too,
Yep.
right? In terms of being able to say, okay, these are the guys that are going to be the cornerstone that they build around in future years. There's obvious players that are part of that conversation. Taliese Fuanga, for instance, who's been excellent as their starting left tackle after being drafted this season. But looking back to previous draft classes, Alante Taylor is a guy that needs to be a big focus for this team in terms of retention and making sure that they're building around him. Figure
Mhm.
he's one of the reasons why you can look at a Marshawn Lattimore and say, okay, there's the benefits to trading him. The Saints could get away with doing it if they choose to. Again, I'd be surprised if they did. But hey, I was surprised that the Saints moved on from Dennis Allen, their head coach,
Both were.
mid-season. So yeah, right. So like if one can happen, then certainly the other can too. And so I think that players like him, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Rico Payton, you look over at the safety spot with Jordan Howden, you look over at wide receiver with Chris Olave, probably not going to see him for the rest of the season. And so once you get Bub Means back, getting a look at Bub Means, figuring out what you really have in Mason Tipton, all these other players, you have the Dallin Holker, you have the real opportunity here to get a look at all of these players and get things figured out in terms of who you want to keep and where you want to go. I think that the offseason should be an offseason of change for New Orleans right away. I don't think you need to delay it. There's only so many things that you can do, but everything that you can do, I think you should look to turn over as much as you can. There's no need for retention in this conversation. Everything has to be about laying your foundation for the next era. And some players are going to be a part of that, but I expect that a lot of players, maybe more than people expect, won't be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, you look at the free agent class. I mean, there's just guys that aren't going to be back. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
even the guys that are presumably going to be on this roster next year, is that something that you want to stick with, or do you want to say, okay, well, we're going in a different direction? The Saints have shown that they will do that. And look, Paulson Adebo is a guy that I think about. Like, I'd love to have him back in New Orleans, but like you said, do they say, okay, now we want Alante outside and Kool-Aid outside?
Hmm.
That's our future. We don't want to pay Paulson, even though we probably could get him back on a really good, I wouldn't say team friendly deal, but obviously with him getting hurt, the major injury, his market's not going to be something on the
Hmm.
high end. Like, he's probably going to have to take a 1 year flyer and such. Can you build around what you have in the secondary with Jordan Howden and how much more do you have in Tyrann Mathieu? Do you bring back a Will Harris? I like the
Hmm.
concept of Will Harris. I think he's played exceptionally well and up until the injury. I think that's a piece that you look at.
Yeah.
Linebacker, you have Pete Warner that you locked up on a big
Already set
extension.
up. Hmm.
And so from there, do you roll with the Anthony Orgy and just maybe develop him a little bit more if you have Michael Hodges on the defensive line?
Good
You
call.
got to figure out a pass rush situation, right? Like, if you're not going to use Cam Jordan, is he going to stay here, right? Like, do you
Right.
just keep him in here to play 10 snaps a game? No, I
Right.
probably don't think so. Are they happy with what they have in the interior with Colin and Nathan Shepard? Or is it something where you say, okay, let's look to Brian Brzee and Christian Boyd as our future? There's
Hmm.
just so many different questions because I think the shakeup here with DA is probably more on the defensive side for me, not
Sure.
necessarily the offensive side.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the other things you have to look at is what do you do at quarterback?
Sure.
Like Derek Carr is going to be the starter for the rest of the season as long as he stays healthy. But do you take advantage of the last two games of the season to give Jake
Hmm.
Hayner a start and give Spencer Rattler another start and see where those guys are? Right, the opportunity to get them into more situations where you can get more exposure to them, get more of an evaluation of them, whatever that might be, and then do you talk to Derek Carr about the opportunity of like, hey, you have a no trade clause. Do you want to get moved somewhere that you're not so that you're not having to deal with a rebuild? Do you want to be somewhere where you're a part of that, or do you want to be somewhere where you're competing? And then give him the option to say yes or no. Give him the option to say, no, I want to stay with my guys. And if he does that, great. Willing to take a little bit of a pay cut in the process? Might as well. Might as well ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to be told no if you don't ask. And so,
Yep.
you're going to have to look to what that future looks like. The Saints effectively have until the third day of the new league year in March to figure out what they want to do with Derek Carr, and for Derek Carr to figure out what he wants to do, where he wants to be, what he wants to navigate, and what is effectively the twilight or the beginning of the twilight of his career. Is a rebuild something he wants to be a part of or not? And both answers are completely acceptable. But give him the opportunity to be able to say that. He can finish out this season and then make that decision. And then if you end up moving on from him at that point before that third day, saves you a little bit of money, got to eat some dead cap, but saves you some immediate salary. And then, allows you to be able to get started with that rebuild with young quarterbacks on rookie deals, even if you don't draft one in 2025.
Yeah. And I'm with you. I think that's a big part of the puzzle is, does Derek want to stay here now that DA's gone? Is Clint Kubiak back? Again, we talked about it. I think this offensive staff, unless something just goes to the wayside, I think they got the right offensive staff pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I just think now that you have it, you just need to look at where your players are at, evaluate, because I think Derek Carr can fit this system. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
is that what you want to do going forward, right? And so there's plenty more to dissect here.
And what does your new head coach want to do?
Exactly.
Right? That's the other thing.
Yep. And we'll tackle a lot more of that when we come back from the break. Hey folks, John Hendricks here, Second and Saints. Wanted to talk to you quickly about Underdog because it is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts, discounts, or free picks. Plus, all new users get a free pick. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Create entries with all football selections or mix and match across your favorite sports. Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. With Underdog's double flex option, you can even take 2 L's and still have your entry to be a win. So go download the app today and use code Second Saints to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's code Second Saints. Now here comes the legal jargon. Must be 18 or older, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and older in Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Back here on Second and Saints, John Hendrickson and Ross Jackson. Ross, before we broke, look, you were bringing up some validity on where do they go on their next coach, right? Like, let's start and say Darren Rizzi is obviously the interim head coach because I want to go and tackle and unpack this, like, where do they go after this? Because Darren Rizzi's coming in here. I thought his press conference was like, Riz is always a guy that is, you can tell his passion. You can tell he's just so football smart about what he's done and confident, right? And so I loved his press conference. He was quick to acknowledge the elephants in the room. I mean, he was quick to say, there's things I don't like. Like, there's things that we're going to evaluate, things that need to be changed. And with him being a special teams coach, he was right. Like, he does a lot of scouting for starters, and he does a lot of player interaction, like almost every player. And he said, even like the quarterbacks he had a meeting with, but it's true. All the players learn special teams at some point or another. And Darren Rizzi has been the guy for years. And so what do they get in Darren Rizzi for starters? And what kind of expectations do you have going forward since they only have, 8 games left?
Yeah, I think what you get in Darren Rizzi is that you get a guy that is not afraid to challenge people. You and I have talked for years now about how Darren Rizzi is the loudest person on any practice field at all times. He demands, he commands, he does all those other things, and players absolutely love him. Is the thing. He walks that fine line between being the impactful force and being the trustworthy friend for the players. And sometimes you need both of those things. And I think that Darren Rizzi does a very good job of giving you both those things. One of my favorite things that he said during his, I guess we call it introductory press conference as interim head coach, is when Nick asked him about what is your coaching philosophy. And the first thing he said is, I'm an accountability guy. And we've heard over and over again for years and years and years now, not years and years and years, for 3 years. It ain't been that long. It's been 84 years.
Yeah, sticking the same thing.
That I love it.
Oh, God.
That that like accountability, right? See something, say something is something that Alvin Carrera talked about, the fumbling stuff and everything. When Mark Ingram and Sean Payton were both on, I think it was Kay Adams' show, and they were talking about, and Mark Ingram said something like, "Yeah, well, if you were around the fumbles, I know that wouldn't be happening," like those kinds of things and stuff like that. Like all of that showed you that like that accountability, that things being let go in practice and all that was of detriment to this team. Darren Rizzi and Sean Payton worked very closely to one another. Darren Rizzi, I think, learned a lot from Sean Payton, but I think that there's a lot of enforcement in Darren Rizzi as well. And I think that's something that I'm looking forward to this team being able to take advantage of, because this is a team that right now needs to be coached. And what they need to do is that they need to be, a coach has told me this before, and I love this phrase. You either want to be coached or you want to be told the truth. And I think that Darren Rizzi is somebody that tells the truth. And that's exactly what this team needs right now.
Yeah, and look,
It's what the organization needs right now, actually.
Yes.
Let me go beyond the
Yes.
roster. Sorry about that.
Yes. No, you're fine. I was gonna say, because of what you were talking about, I remember telling this in, I guess, training camp maybe, but I said, because we went through this exercise as like the coach that you would not want to have to like go
That's
look at
right.
after a play.
Yeah.
I said Darren Rizzi because
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that dude would chew my butt out. Like if I did something, I would not want to get on that man's bad side. And look, y'all, he
Right.
comes from a Bill Parcells line, a
Yep.
lineage. What I think people, if you didn't see or you haven't heard or you don't know, blue collar type of worker, right? Like, and of
Yep.
course, I'm paraphrasing, but he said in his presser, he's never been handed anything. He was a walk on in college.
Yep.
He was a free agent in the NFL. He started coaching in D2 football. Like, this is a guy who has legitimately earned his stripes, right? And so, again, he's a guy that players respect because he knows what he's doing. He has confidence in what he's doing. And if you don't do the right things, you are going to hear about it. I don't know how many times in training camp he would fire off at a player. That's why I said I would
Yes.
never
Right.
want to get chewed out by him, because
Yeah.
if you did something wrong, he was the loudest guy in the field and he was going to let you know about it. Louder than what, Foster was probably when we saw at training camp. Like, the guy just has that attitude. Like, it's reminiscent of what Sean Payton would tell you. And coming from a Bill Parcells tree, that's the type of thing that you would expect, is you don't let the little stuff go, because like he said, by his rule, the 111th rule, like one player affects the whole team, right? Like it affects the entire scheme. And so, look, I'm excited at the concept of Darren Rizzi coming in here, at least showing something different. Like, if it means somebody's not doing their job on the offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, corner, wherever it is, and they pull that guy out of the game and they bench him, whatever the case may be, send the message. Because at this point, if I'm a player, your feelings don't matter, right? Like, you got what you want. Now it's time for you to hold up your end of the bargain.
Yep. If you want one moment to look at where you can see the dichotomy, the differences between Dennis Allen and Darren Rizzi, look no further than week 18 of last year, when Arthur Smith went yelling at Dennis Allen after the game, after the most controversial touchdown of all time, apparently. And Dennis Allen is kind of trying to like de-escalate the moment and all this stuff. And Darren Rizzi is up there wanting all the smoke. He's yelling back at Arthur Smith, firing back at him, all that other stuff. We've joked around a little bit behind closed doors. I won't go into details in terms of asking like what Darren Rizzi actually said and stuff like that. He did not give the details, I will say that much. But like, there's your dichotomy. That's the guy that you're getting instead of the guy that you had. That is an exact look at the difference between these two guys. And that's not to say that one is better than the other or one is worse than the other, but you could certainly say that one's very different than the other.
Yeah, completely. And again, what they need is that guy right now. Like, it's just been kind of like
attitude.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you look at, and again, we're going to beat this dead horse, but Dennis Allen, kind of the keep doing what you're doing. and again,
Right.
play Saints football. Well, if you don't really know what that standard is, or you're not even living out that standard, then how the hell are you supposed to know what to go do? Like, you could be
Right.
like, I think I know, like, I'll go
Yeah.
try it, and then you don't do it, and they're like, well, you're not doing what we asked you to do. Well, you haven't even set the expectation in the first place. And so, again, I'm excited in that aspect that at least maybe there's a little bit more accountability here. And again, he's got the buy-in of the locker room. They've handled this situation, from everything I've seen, heard, and been told, that it's been handled the right way, and that people were receptive of it. And it's the mindset now is, take your day off on Tuesday, but Wednesday, come ready to work, because we're
Yep.
going to work, and they're going to look at everything. They're going to look at the practice schedule. Like, we have a pretty set schedule every week. I'm
Mhm.
curious to see if that changes somewhat or
Same.
anything like
Yeah.
that. But it's one of those things where I don't know if we'll see all of the visual changes that happen. Riz is still going to have a hand in special teams. Phil Galliano is going to still have, or he's going to have a little bit more of expanded role. They're going to bring on a quality control guy that's supposed to be announced here soon. But again, his role and duties don't necessarily shift. But for him, again, if he does something like, let's say, a 5-3, a 4-4, do you think that's enough to say, okay, this is our next head coach and we don't really need to go look? Or do you say he's just going to fill in the blanks, he's going to get us where we need to go, and then at the end of the year, we're going to actually see and do this thorough coaching search to see what we want?
Yeah, I think, and I'll say this, so this as outright as I can. I think it would be utterly irresponsible, no matter what happens this season, for them to not expand their coaching search beyond their own facility come the offseason. The Saints can
Totally
go
agree.
8-0 with Darren Rizzi. They won't. They could go 8-0 with Darren Rizzi throughout the rest of the season. Although Foss Monroe, right? He said, like, listen, maybe I can't remember exactly what he said, how he said it, but like, maybe it's the athletic confidence, or the confidence of the athlete, or whatever. But he thinks they can do it. If they do it, fantastic. I still think, even in that situation, you go out there and you do your due diligence to look at what else is out there. I think you have to do that. But I do think that Darren Rizzi, if he earns it, and honestly, I think he will, needs to be brought back at least for an interview and to be considered. And I mean genuinely considered, like actually considered, for the head coaching role, if he does enough by season's end. And I would say that doing enough, 4-4 gets you the interview, 5-3 gets you seriously considered. You know what I mean? I think that that's really what you're looking for. I would argue probably that it's 3-5 and 4-4, but I'm pushing the goalposts a little bit here, because I
Yeah.
do think that the Saints, in undergoing a new era, need new ideas, need new perspectives, need new voices. But who knows? Darren Rizzi could be the guy to bring all three of those things, or go out and get the people that bring all of those things, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that is a big part of the equation this offseason, is that Darren Rizzi needs to be considered. And that wouldn't be, if he earns it. And that wouldn't be out of the ordinary. The Saints interviewed not only Dennis Allen as an internal hire candidate when in 2022, but they interviewed Darren Rizzi as well. So they've shown before that they already think of him as a potential.
Yeah. And again, here's the thing is, look what happened when you went with familiarity and you thought continuity was going to be the thing,
That's
right?
the thing.
And I'm
Yeah,
not
100%.
saying that would be Darren Rizzi, because I think his coaching style is complete opposite of what Dennis Allen does, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you just see it out there, and we're going to find out what it is. I mean, 5-3 is probably the best case scenario. Now, if he goes 6-2, I think you really got to take a look at it. But I just don't know if you're going to magically start stringing together games. I mean, I think they're going to have the initial burst against the Falcons. Now, am I
Yeah.
going to sit here and tell you they're going to beat them? No, because I just don't know. Like, they got one thing, and teams typically respond to this, and it is the Falcons. It would go a long way, but right behind that, you got with the Browns. And then you got a bye week, and then you got the Giants, and then you got
You got the
I'm
surging
sorry, you
Rams
got the
before that
Rams,
too.
and you got the
Hmm.
Rams, and then the Giants. And so
Yep.
it's not going to be easy, because you could realistically maybe go 2-2 in that stretch, right? But what's going to be the litmus test for Darren Rizzi? You know what I'm saying? Is it going to be the results, or is it going to be how he keeps the locker room together, or how he gets players different? I think that's what is probably a little bit more fascinating to me. Not that the results don't matter in this case, but I'm looking at how this team responds, how the locker room responds, and you're going to find out quickly the guys who want to be here and the guys who don't want to be here.
Yeah, it's a really good call. That like just as much about it, it could be, you could stumble your way to 4-4. You could stumble your way through to an impressive, end of season record without actually seeing the things that you really need to see in the facility. And you can't let that happen, right? You have a lot of bad teams on the rest of your schedule. And so you can't let that be the thing. And so I'll mention something that I said on tomorrow's episode, on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Saints. So some of you might hear this a little early. Um, Tyrann Matthew said that one of the things that they need to do as a football team is get back to having fun again. One of the things that Darren Rizzi said was they're not going to be boring to watch. He
Right.
said, "I promise you that." Uh, that's all good. It's exciting. That's nice. The organization, however, cannot get fooled into confusing fun with effective. Right?
Mm.
Fun with improvement. Those two things can't get confused. And so you have to be fun and productive in order to really be able to maximize your opportunities coming out of this season. If you're Darren Rizzi, I think he has the capability of doing that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that, oh, he's just going to be fun. He's not going to be this, but you gotta make sure, because you have bad teams on the schedule. You got to make sure that if this team does go on some kind of an impressive run, that it's happening because of what the teams are doing and not what the opponents aren't doing. But I do think that that can be the case. I do think that the Saints will win more. Here's my kind of bold prediction, quote unquote. The Saints will win more games under Darren Rizzi than they won under Dennis Allen here in 2024. So I'm looking for the Saints to get at least 3 wins before the
Yeah.
season is over. If they're able to do that, then I think, yeah, you absolutely have to at least consider Darren Rizzi, have him come in and interview, do the whole thing, make him a part of the coaching search, but also look outside the facility and look at your opportunity to change everything, because I do think there's value in that.
Yeah, and look, for me, even going beyond the record or whatever the case, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to use these euphemisms of going beyond or something, because I think that's just it's enough. Enough is enough, right? But look at it. Realistically, I said, okay, they could beat the Giants, they could beat the Browns. That's 2 more wins, so you get to 5. But beat a better team, beat a couple of these better teams. If he beats the Packers on the road, if he beats the Rams at home, if he can beat when Washington comes to town,
Mhm.
I count those as a little bit more. And if you could beat the Bucks at the end of the year, those 4 wins would tell me more about this team than them just beating up on the Giants and the Browns and stuff. Like, if you could beat those 4 teams in Rizzy's stretch and then maybe get bonus a lanyap or something, then that would speak pretty much volumes to me. Just a sense that, okay, this team under him can beat a better team, because that's what's been their problem, is that they can beat up on the low teams. They can't beat the better teams because they get in their own
Right.
way, all the things that just unravel for them. And that's what I'd pay a lot of attention to.
What's the last time that they legitimately beat a team that's better than them?
Well, you can't
Would it
count Dallas because Dallas sucks.
Can't
So,
count Dallas. Dallas,
like, I'm sorry,
jeez,
sorry, them boys, but like,
jeez.
look, it's like I wrote, it's
No, I
fool's
love
gold.
it.
That's all it was.
Right,
It was fool's gold, because you thought you were great, and then look how it was, like the Patriots game. When you beat them 34-0.
right,
That's not who you were. You beat up on one of the worst teams in the league. Okay, whoop de doo. Like,
right,
go beat somebody good. You know what I mean? And
right.
so that's just my thing.
Was
And so,
was it maybe the Rams in 2022? The Rams
golly,
were
I
3 and
mean,
7 in that game.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm trying to think, like, keep going down the rabbit hole, but every superior team I can think of, they've lost to,
Yeah,
like,
I mean
legitimately.
they did beat the 13-3 Philadelphia Eagles, but that was a Gardner Minshew led 13 and
Yeah,
3 Philadelphia Eagles, right? So that's not a
right,
team that they were better than based on that,
right,
right? So and then last year, like, they didn't beat anybody that they were better than at all. And so, like, that's one of
yeah,
those things where, like, I mean, this team played to who it was. It never played above, never punched up, right? Um,
right,
and Darren Rizzi, I mean, he's a grinder, right? Like, all the
yeah,
things you highlighted about him, just like in his personal life, I mean, all those things
right.
that you highlighted about him, like, he's a dude that punches up. And so I'll be curious to see if the team adopts that.
Yeah, and again, it's all they care about is it starts with the Falcons, right? Starts
Yep.
with Wednesday. It's a
wisely.
new era. It's all those things, right? And it's again, we're gonna find out. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's an added pressure on him to come out on Sunday and say you have to punch the Falcons in the mouth. That would be an added bonus if they were able to
Sure.
do that, because I mean, if something crazy happens in the South, it just tanks. If you did get to 7-10, 8-9, you never know how bad this division could be. You could luck yourself into a wild card, but they got to start winning these division games. They got to do all these other things. Like the deck's already stacked against them, right? Like you've already had 3 NFC South losses. It's not going to happen, but we're just going down the rabbit hole. We've taken the pill
Yeah,
from
right. Yes.
Morpheus and we've
Yeah,
gone
we took
down
the
the
Riz
rabbit
pill.
hole,
Took
right?
the Riz pill.
Rizius. That's what we're going to call him. Rizius.
I love
Oh
it.
man. Yeah. Oh man. It's exciting in some aspects. It's exciting but not. But I think the other side of this in the fallout is, the reality that, this is going to be another year without playoffs, right? Like I think that's just
Right.
kind of the reality here. And again, a rebuild, a retool, a reshuffle, I don't care what you call it. It's got to be something. And you call it whatever you want to call it. And again, I sound like a broken record because I said this on the pod the other day, but do the things necessary to put yourself in a conversation, because we understand the cap will be limitation. And again, I understand the other side of the coin with the cap, because they can always get under the cap. They can always do this, kick the can, do all this stuff. The problem and the scrutiny where it comes into play, where it's actually right, is when you don't get the results. Like, what's the point in shuffling all this money over when you continuously miss the playoffs? Like,
Bingo.
if you were making the playoffs, nobody would care, but you're not.
Right.
So your strategy isn't working. And so they got the ram check, stuff to worry about. Marshawn's contract, they've got to figure out what they're going to do with Cam Jordan. I mean, there is a lot of big money that they're going to have to do. And the salary cap is projected to rise like it does every year. I don't know how much it will rise, but every other team gets more salary cap too. So it's going to be interesting. They've got 3 players on void years. I think it's Chase Young, Juwan Johnson, and I'm forgetting the third person. Somebody else is set to be a free agent after this year. I'd have to look really quick, but you can talk while I do that, maybe.
I will absolutely talk while you do that.
It's going to come to me. I'll be like, oh, no.
No, I completely agree, though. Like, this is your opportunity to evaluate and figure all these things out. And I do think that, like,
Juwan.
there's Juwan. No, you said Juwan. You said Juwan. Keep looking.
Oh, it's Juwan, Chase Young, and Tano. Those are the 3 that are void deals.
Tano. Yeah. Who hopefully they get back.
Who did I say before? Yeah.
You had said Juwan, and then I don't remember the third person now.
Chase
I
Young
can't
was
remember the
the
other
other one.
third person.
Yeah.
And Young, and then it was Tano. Anyway, sorry.
Need
This
my
is how
medicine.
John
No,
and
I'm
I
just kidding.
actually talk to one another throughout the day. It's like I forgot. Oh, I
This
forgot.
is what you get with us. Like,
Yeah.
we're never going to be like
How many
this
times-
professional proper thing. Like, come on, guys, y'all know that.
How many times have we sat next to each other in the facility, and I open my laptop and go, I can't remember what I was doing. What was I doing? Like, that's always a thing. I don't know what I was doing.
Same.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, like if the Saints wanted to go the route of, not necessarily like they do like a light kick the can down the road, like they can kick the thimble down the road a little bit here, and they could, with between if they were to trade Marshawn or whatever, then obviously that helps. But then even if you don't, you could still restructure them. If you're not trading Derek Carr, you could restructure Derek Carr, and then Ryan Ramczyk retires, and then boom, you're compliant with the salary cap. You don't have a lot of spending money, but you're compliant with the salary cap, and then a whole bunch of other players end up probably getting cut at that point. And I think this offseason would be the first time that we actually see the salary cap impact the Saints from a cut perspective. We've seen it from a not able to add talent perspective, or at least not able to add talent on long-term contracts perspective. That was last season, but the actual cuts perspective, I think we see here in 2025. But it's time to do that, right? Like, you're not looking at yourself. You should not be looking at yourself as a Super Bowl contender in 2025. And that's not to be, it's not to tell Saints fans that they shouldn't care or anything like that, but like the team is finally going to embrace where they are. Yeah. The team is finally going to embrace where they are, be realistic, be pragmatic, and, set yourself up so that you are building that winning culture, that winning foundation, as you move ahead. So this is the time to do all those things.
Yeah, and look, you do have a relatively young injection of your roster talent, and so how
Mhm.
do you evaluate that? And that's probably for a future episode where we literally could go down up and down the roster and say, here's the pieces I'd keep, here's the pieces I'd maybe say okay are expendable, or I'd maybe try to say okay I don't want to bring them back or something. That's probably a good exercise for later that we can do,
Yeah.
but look, it's definitely a decision that has to be made. They have to draft better. They have to get more out of their draft picks. They have to make sure that they hit on their draft picks. I mean, shoot, at this point, I think they got more undrafted guys than they do have drafted guys in the last
Right.
several years on their roster playing. And in some aspects, that can be good, but also with that comes inexperience, and the way you only get experience is by being present and playing on the field. And so
Mhm.
I I like the concept of some of these undrafted rookies playing and some of these other guys playing, but you've got to be willing to say, okay, we're okay with growing and developing these guys, and we know that they're going to mess up, but let's be realistic about what kind of team we are. You're not the compete now, go for a playoff and win the division type team. You're just a team that's trying to get better, improve, get under the cap, and cap compliant, whatever the case may be, and then see what happens. Maybe you can turn it around quickly, but typically when you do a rebuild, it's going to take a few years for it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it should. Like that's the other thing too, is like that's good news. That they don't need to be in a rush. They don't have to try to make this work in 2025. They could just spend time. And I think that that's the other thing with this new head coaching search, patience. Patience, patience, patience. And this is an opportunity for them to really prove that they're not the Carolina Panthers, to prove that they are more like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Go out there, hire the head coach, and then be patient. Don't bring somebody in here just to do a rebuild, help them bolster your product, fire that coach, and then go out there and pitch their product to a new head coach. Like, don't
Yeah.
do that. Don't become that organization. Be patient. If it doesn't work, be honest with yourself, but be patient and work your way through this. I think this has to be a multi-year situation. And that doesn't mean you can't compete and fight like hell in between while you're doing it. Absolutely. Of course that can happen. Look at the Houston Texans. They weren't expected to be a playoff team last year. They
Yeah.
weren't expected to be in that situation, but they got there quicker than they expected. And how did they do it? They did it by letting things come to them. Look at the exact opposite, the Carolina Panthers. They trade up, they go and get the number 1 overall pick from the Chicago Bears, and then they draft Bryce Young, who, don't get me wrong, is the guy that just won against the New Orleans Saints. I understand that, but I think we all know that Bryce Young's not going to pan out in the NFL. And so
Mm.
that's the situation that the Carolina Panthers are in for being impatient. Don't be the Carolina Panthers. Be
Yeah.
patient. Be
Yeah.
patient.
And you were reading my mind because I was literally going to say is I know people like, oh, let's get the Dan Campbell, which I'd love to see somebody of his caliber. But you mentioned
Mhm.
Houston. I was thinking more along the lines of a D'Amico Ryans, like
With you.
find that type of guy to get into the building because he's relatable as a player. He's also relatable as a person and just all the things. And you see his passion. You see how well he's able to do it. And this is a
Mhm.
guy that was playing football not that long ago. Like he's not
Right?
a very experienced, tenured coach. And I don't mean that as a disrespect thing, but
No.
it's just you look at it, he hasn't been in his league coaching for 25 years or anything. And maybe the Saints need to go in a younger direction. It just depends. You got to evaluate and go with everything that's on the table and take your time doing this. Like again, I know you got the Senior Bowl that comes up after the season. You've got the combine, and because they're going to have a new head coach, they're going to be able to start their offseason workout program a couple weeks early.
That's
But
right.
yeah,
Yes.
so that moves up the timetable for us a little bit too. So
Yes, I love it.
yeah, so there are some other bonuses and caveats here, and you get
Mhm.
a first year head coach and all that other stuff. But man,
And
crazy
no hard
times.
knocks.
Yeah, yeah, we can
No
finally
hard
avoid the
knocks.
hard knocks conversation. Yes. Oh my gosh, just made my night with that one. Oh man, we can finally put that crap to bed for at least a season, right?
Yeah,
Golly,
right.
that's wild. Uh, on that note, Ross, my man, what's coming up at Locked On and LouisianaSports.net? I know we just
Yeah,
talked the other
absolutely.
night, but
So
what more is coming? Because a lot is
yeah,
coming here.
I know, I know. Obviously, like reaction episodes and stuff like that are already up over at Locked On Saints. Tomorrow's episode is about identifying 9 different head coaching candidates going into next year, Darren Rizzi included. So we start that conversation Wednesday. We'll take a look at the players that survived the trade deadline, and are the young players that knowing that they're going to be in the building should be built around. So we'll dive into that as well as a bunch more, but a bunch of different angles that we'll look at throughout that. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably going to spend more time talking head coach for the next few weeks than the actual games that are upcoming, but we will
Yep.
also do game previews and stuff like that. We'll have that for you here on Second and Saints as well. LouisianaSports.net. Today I broke down the news, why the firing was a good choice or was the right choice, why Darren Rizzi was the right choice, and then the ripple effects that come from this move in terms of what the rest of the season looks like. Looked at odds for the next head coach, all those other things. And then tomorrow, my first piece in the morning is going to be about the future of Derek Carr, which is another one of those ripple effect pieces. So we'll take a look at sort of the impact of things as they continue to move ahead for New Orleans. So whole bunch of stuff upcoming for you. What you got coming up for everybody over at Saints News Network?
Man, well, a lot obviously after today, and I just put out
Yeah.
something on Darren Rizzi, and so definitely go check that out on SI Sports Illustrated and just see how just to get a little bit more insight on Darren Rizzi and
Yeah.
some of the quotes he said. That was something, and then of course, if you haven't seen what Gail Benson and Mickey Loomis had said about firing and Dennis Allen and what Allen had said, it's all up there too. That's caused a little bit of controversy with Mickey, but
Yeah.
what do you
Who
expect
is
him to say, I
scheduled?
guess, in some happy? Yeah,
Yeah, who is still
big one.
scheduled to do his radio show Tuesday night, by the way. So
Yeah,
we will
yeah,
hear from Mickey Loomis. It just won't
yeah.
be media asking questions, like all the
Right.
media asking questions.
Right. It'll be fascinating to see that. But, again, there's so many different directions. Again, I put out a trade deadline piece too. Again, I don't expect them to be fire sale mode or anything like that. There are some potential targets that could be on the move, but I think for this team, with them moving away from Dennis Allen, I think they want to keep most everything intact unless they've said, we just don't like this player. We don't want this player. Let's get a day 3 pick for him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I
Right,
think that would
right,
be
right.
the only other thing, or, something else. But a lot more to talk about because this is going to be a interesting week. I mean, this is probably the most interesting week since we've had since training camp or rookie mini camp when we saw Clint Kubiak first in action with the rookies. Spencer Rattler.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Right.
that was the last time I think when that was level of excitement. I mean, week 1 was obviously a big one, but not something
Sure.
that was this monumental of a change, right? Like, that's just
Yeah.
kind of the thing. So, but you got so many different avenues to choose when you get your Saints news. So we just appreciate you giving us your time for sure.
For
But be
real.
sure to check out Locked On, LouisianaSports.net, Saints News Network, and those other guys too. Everybody does some great
Everybody's
work,
doing
and
great work
everybody
right
brings a different opinion. So I
now.
can sit here and name everybody. And I don't want to leave anybody's name off, but you guys know as well as I do, there's plenty of talented people that cover this team. Diversify
Yep.
your bonds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
It's time for you to diversify your bonds, bro.
yeah,
The other and when we say that, by the way, we mean a lot of people, even those that aren't like on the beat
yeah,
and in the facility. Like,
yeah,
check out a lot of different opinions, and you're going to hear a lot of different names, head coaches, all this other stuff. Like, this is really the time that I take in a lot of content and support a lot of creators because you're going to see a lot of people rise to the occasion.
yep,
So I think a lot of people deserve the support when it comes to that.
yeah. Well said. And so again,
Thanks,
we
man.
appreciate you tuning into us. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. A lot of new subscribers, so thank you for coming
Thank
to the
you.
channel and stuff. Only look forward to driving more content because we've got a lot of content that's going to be coming soon because of everything that's been happening. But for now, we'll be back soon enough. Thank you so much for tuning in. On behalf of Ross Jackson, John Hendricks signing out for Second and Saints. Y'all have a good one.
Love you.